Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for the first online edition of the Viantis Enterprise Days. I'm Anthony from the marketing team at Viantis in France, and I'm delighted to see you here. The session will start in a few seconds, but I first wanted to share with you some practical information. As you may have noticed, we'll all be in mute mode during the presentation, so you can't talk to us directly. However, I invite you to use the chat box to leave your comments and your questions, as there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Finally, as some of you may have understood, this session has been pre-recorded to avoid any technical problems or last-minute cancellation. But we will be in live at the end to answer your questions with the speakers. Thanks again for your participation, and see you right after.
Hello everyone, I'm Nathan, I'm the CTO here at Viantis. Thanks a lot for attending our Viantis Enterprise Days this year. Today, I'm going to talk about minimizing risk and optimizing value with your cloud transformation. Let's take a look at our agenda. I have 4 questions that I will address during this presentation. What's going on with the cloud? What is Atlassian's strategy? How to define your cloud strategy, and how to successfully execute that strategy. Let's go. Let's start with a fine quote now. That quote comes from McKinsey Digital. It reads, "Companies that adopt the cloud well bring new capabilities to market more quickly, innovate more easily, and scale more efficiently, while also reducing technology risk." So I really like that quote because to me it summarizes in a very short sentence all the benefits that a cloud transformation can bring to any company. But of course, we'll see during that presentation all of those benefits in detail. So what's going on with the cloud exactly? So can you see that thing in the distance here that looks like a mountain? Well, actually, if you look closer, it's not a mountain. It is a gigantic wave, hundreds of meters high, and it's coming towards you at high speed. So now what do? This wave is the cloud, so you might as well get prepared for it. So I have some numbers I'm going to share with you to represent what the cloud is today. So 77% of businesses currently have one or more applications in the cloud. 61% of businesses who move to the cloud report less downtime. 68% of businesses are considered themselves SaaS-driven, which means that they choose software as a service first. And finally, the average enterprise use more than 1,400 cloud services in average. So that's quite a lot. So why do companies migrate to the cloud? What are the main drivers that make them do that? Well, the cloud transformation first has 2 different aspects. The first one would be leveraging the cloud resources for your internal development. And the second one would be the use of software as a service instead of self-hosted applications. So the ultimate goal for cloud transformation for development is function as a service, so a fully automated pipeline enabling to release more often, multiple times per day. And the objectives and the benefits of those 2 cloud transformation aspects are quite different. So in this presentation, we will mainly focus on software as a service, as it's our topic of interest today. However, the 2 are quite intertwined. So we can't really be successful in a cloud transformation if we address only one of those components. Because if you have one side of your business that's very agile and the other one which is not, you'll see that you'll create bottlenecks somewhere. So I'll mention that a few times during that presentation. So let's go back to our drivers. The drivers are separated in two categories. The first one being strategic items. And so as part of strategy, innovation is one of the big main drivers for cloud transformations. Being on the cloud enables you to innovate more quickly. So you decrease the time between an idea that comes up in your teams and its availability on the market. You also benefit from the latest innovation from the vendor. And finally, you're also able to leverage some cloud services capabilities. For example, on AWS, you have a lot of AI capabilities that you can leverage while being on the cloud. Second strategic item is the business agility. Most of the companies that actually did that move to the cloud report a faster time to market from 20 to 40%. That's huge. You also have a better scalability, and you're able to repurpose your resources, your internal resources, so that they can focus on your core business. Finally, you can leverage the automation in the cloud as part of your DevOps initiatives, and you can release more often. Now, for the tactical items, the first one is security. So it may sometimes sound counterintuitive, but actually when you're using a SaaS product, as part of your subscription fees, you're paying for security expertise in a very specific domain, and this is included in the cost. Then you'll have reliability. Most of the companies report less downtime on the cloud. I just said that. And you'll also remove all the technical debt that you used to have on your own infrastructure, because this is handled by the vendor. Finally, as I said earlier, you're able to repurpose your resources to focus on your core business, making them probably more useful to the company. Finally, we have the IT costs that you're able to reduce in some cases. So this is not necessarily true in all software as a service, for all software as a service applications. So we'll focus a bit more on the costs right now. Let's look at the total cost of ownership first. So total cost of ownership is basically how much money does that application cost in total, including everything. So when you're on the cloud, it's quite easy because the TCO is just the subscription fee for the cloud application plus the administration cost you add on top of it to maintain your product. On the other side, when you have a self-hosted application, it contains your license fee, but also your hardware or hosting costs. And administration is the same than for a cloud deployment. But you can't look at this picture like that. You need to also add in there all the hidden costs that are the implementation of that hardware or hosting, the maintenance cost, which goes higher and higher, the change management, which is always a very painful and difficult thing to tackle, the security part, the upgrades, and the performance. So when all of that adds up, you may end up in a situation where those two costs are actually almost the same. However, if you look only at the total cost of ownership, sometimes the cloud is more expensive, even when you take into account those hidden costs. But is it necessarily a problem? Well, not really, because if you take a look at return on investment, being on the cloud provides value, and that value has a cost, obviously. First one is agility is not free. You have all that new agility that you didn't have before, and that doesn't come for free. Then your costs is being transferred from CapEx to OpEx, which enables you to have a better cash flow management and a better predictability of your costs in the company. And finally, there's the cost of not changing, which is always hard to measure. But when you're on a self-hosted environment, it's always very difficult and very complicated to change anything. And sometimes you may choose not to change, and you can actually create bottlenecks or technical debt that way. And this has a cost for your company. So when evaluating a cloud transformation, you always look at the return on investment and not only the TCO. So what Atlassian is doing about all of that? Let's focus on this right now. Atlassian's strategy is to become a cloud-first company, and they actually made quite a lot of progress towards that objective already. They currently have more than 150,000 clients that are using their cloud products today. And actually, 95% of new clients are starting with cloud products. So you may have seen the recent announcement as well with the end of server licenses sales. So in 2024. So this means they will continue to go further in that cloud transformation strategy and try to bring all their clients to the cloud as soon as possible. So the Atlassian cloud offerings comes in 4 different offerings. So we have the free cloud version that suits all the small teams. Then the standard cloud, which has been there for quite a lot of time now. The premium cloud was released last year and is there to meet more requirements regarding to SLA, to unlimited storage, sandbox environment. And very recently, they released their enterprise cloud, which serves more advanced requirements. One of the main features of enterprise cloud is the ability for you to create as many instances as you want on a single cloud license, which means you can create up to, let's say, 10 Jira Software instances if you have 10 separate departments using Jira Software within your company and you don't want them to be on the same instance. That's just huge in terms of value that it can bring to your company. Enterprise Cloud also comes with better SLA and other interesting capabilities like data residency. That has been a long-awaited feature at Atlassian Cloud. So it's now ready and available for the Enterprise Cloud. So now if we take a closer look to the pros and cons of Atlassian Cloud, here's how it looks like. So in terms of pros, of course, this one is very important. All the new features are shipped to the cloud first, and sometimes they are shipped to the cloud only. So if you want to benefit from the latest Atlassian innovation, cloud is definitely the way to go. The cloud version also has a better user interface. The user experience over there is just better and better, and it gets even better every day. So that means your end users do not necessarily have to waste time learning the products as it gets easier and easier to use over time. Next, there's scalability. On Atlassian Cloud, you can add as many users as you want, and you don't have anything else to do than, well, of course, paying a bit more for your licenses, but that's all. Security on the cloud is also very good. Atlassian has a lot of compliance frameworks that they follow. They also provide vulnerability fixes very quickly on the cloud and always on the cloud first, which is a huge advantage compared to behind the firewall products, where you need to install the patch and test it beforehand. So there's always a window where you're kind of vulnerable to that issue until it gets patched. And finally, there are also more and more cloud-only apps on the Atlassian marketplace and integrations with third-party products. So cloud transformation goes beyond just Atlassian, and all the new software companies are driving their clients to the cloud, which means all these integrations between those software are becoming easier and easier to tackle when you're on the cloud. And they're available only if you're on the cloud. Now, for the cons, one thing is that Atlassian Cloud is a multi-tenant environment. This means that you don't have your own software running on your own server, and your server is dedicated to you and you only. This is multi-tenant, so this means that a few things are shared, even though your data is logically separated from all other customers. There are some companies that just don't accept multi-tenant environments. So Atlassian Cloud will remain a multi-tenant environment, at least for now. Another thing is that Atlassian Cloud is limited to 20,000 users for now. So they are bringing more and more capabilities over there in order to go beyond 20,000 users in the future, but for now, it's limited to that amount. Another concern is the data ownership. When you're on the cloud, you may feel as if your data is not yours anymore, and some companies don't really like that. Well, the data is still yours anyway, but we can definitely understand that concern, as the data is not in your database, and you may be wondering what happens if something goes wrong with the environment. Will I lose any data, and so on? So this is a valid concern. Another thing is custom URL. So this is on Atlassian Cloud roadmap, but at the moment you're not able to have your own URL for your instance. It will necessarily be something.atlassian.net. It could be a bit misleading, especially if your instance is accessible to your clients, for example. Finally, the functional scope on Atlassian Cloud is still a bit behind what's available on server or data center. So the gap is closing, definitely, but at the moment, there are still capabilities that are missing on cloud. Another option is to use Valiantis Cloud. So Valiantis Cloud is our hosting offering, where we install server or data center applications on AWS, and we manage them for you. This is a good option for clients who can't really go to Atlassian Cloud because of the current restrictions, but they may be going to Atlassian Cloud in the future. And it's a good option for them in the meantime, because they don't want to handle that infrastructure anymore, and they want that instance to be managed by experts like we are. So the pros for Valiantis Cloud is that all the data center apps are available. We're not running the cloud version, we're running the data center version, so you can use any app that's available for data center. The data ownership is less of a problem with Valiantis Cloud, because we are actually able to provide you with a copy of your data on a daily basis, for example, for reversibility. Compliance is also a plus, as we ISO 27001 certified for information security. And we're also working on HIPAA compliance before the end of this year, which is on Atlassian's roadmap, but is not ready yet. As I said, Valiantis Cloud can be a really good stepping stone towards Atlassian Cloud once it's ready for you. As for the cons, well, you need to use data center licenses, so this comes at a certain cost. And finally, we are not the vendor cloud, so this means that all the benefits of being on a vendor cloud, you don't have those benefits on Valiantis Cloud. You have more control over your instance and over your release cycle, but you don't benefit from all those new features that come out on Atlassian Cloud. So now let's see what you can do in terms of cloud strategy. So your cloud strategy first revolves around your data. So there's a set of questions that you need to ask yourself about your data. So what needs and constraints do you have with your data now and in the future? You may have regulations internally, you may have plenty of things and of needs that you'll need to fulfill with your data, and that will drive your cloud strategy. Next, where is that data hosted today, and where would it be hosted in the future? This is an important information because sometimes the where it is hosted today can drive where it must be hosted in the future. Then how is it currently protected? The security is a very important part of any cloud strategy. So you must make sure that within your cloud strategy, you make sure that your data is going to remain as secure as it was before. Or actually, you may want to improve that data security if you weren't in a safe place right now. Next, is your data integrated with other systems in the company? So it's very rare, especially in very large instances, that your instance works on its own and doesn't communicate with any other system in your company. Most of the time, you have plenty of other applications that are working with your Atlassian instances. And so if you migrate your instance to the cloud, can you actually make sure that all these integrations will continue to work? That's a very important thing to check, right? Finally, how is that data accessed? Do you have specific authentication rules like two-factor authentication? Is that a requirement? Is that something that you will still need to have in your target environment? Well, that's for you to decide. You need to answer all those questions. One thing that you mustn't forget as well is that the use of your software as a service products is part of the overall company cloud strategy, and Atlassian products is a small part of that SaaS strategy as well. So when you answer those questions, these may actually be required. There may actually be requirements that comes from that strategy, that overall cloud strategy that you may have to take into account. Another thing in your cloud strategy that you must define is your target state. So where do you want to land exactly? What's your final state with your Atlassian instances? So when we ask that question to clients, most of the time they think of that very simple scenario. They have one instance and they move everything to the cloud and all at once. And in some specific scenario, this may feel a bit scary. So don't worry, there are other scenarios available. A few of them are here. So the second one here is to split or federate your instance into several multiple cloud instances. This actually became easier with Enterprise Cloud now that you're able to run as many cloud instances as you want. Another option is to migrate your instance, but you do that project per project instead of migrating everything at once, which might be a bit disrupting for your end users. The next option is to merge or consolidate your existing server or data center licenses before moving everything to the cloud. This is sometimes a very interesting move if you want to save up on licenses and administration costs, because having all those instances might actually bring your costs up, and it might also be a problem in terms of governance, because all those separate instances might be managed in different ways, but you might want to actually rationalize everything into a single instance. Finally, as I explained before, one option is also to move everything to Vayantis Cloud first as a stepping stone and then migrate everything to Atlassian Cloud. Finally, as part of your cloud strategy, there are other items that you need to consider. One is when. Some companies are just not ready for cloud, but they may be ready in the future. That doesn't mean that you can't prepare right now in order to execute that strategy later. And as I said, you need to make sure your Atlassian strategy fits with your company strategy towards moving to the cloud. So there may be an overarching objective of moving everything to the cloud by a certain date. So you must make sure that you fit within that date. That doesn't mean you need to have that right now, but you may need to have that in 2 years. Next thing is governance. As I mentioned earlier, the way you manage behind the firewall instances is not the same way as you manage a cloud environment. So you'll need to adapt your governance and make sure you get ready for all those changes in your governance framework. Next thing is the gap analysis. As I said, Atlassian Cloud is a different product from Atlassian Server or Data Center, so there are gaps in there. Gaps come from functional requirements and also non-functional requirements. So you must make sure that you define all your requirements and you map that to what Atlassian Cloud can actually offer and see if there are gaps and if you're ready to accept those gaps or if we need to find workaround to those gaps. Next, you look at all the benefits and risks of doing that cloud migration. Well, when you're doing that, definitely we've talked about the benefits, but we've not highlighted the risks a lot. When you're moving data from one place to another, there's always risks involved. What I'll encourage you to do is to focus on where the benefits are high and the risks are low, and not the other way around. But you can do that only when you have a clear view of what benefits you will leverage and what risk you have identified so far. Your TCO and ROI analysis must be done as part of that benefits and risks analysis, definitely. Finally, as part of your cloud strategy, you'll have to work on your communication plan. Migrating to the cloud for some companies will be very, very disrupting. So you must actually work on your communication plan in advance and make sure you prepare all your employees to that transition. It may take months, years, I don't know, it depends on your environment, but make sure you keep your employees engaged and up to date as to what's your final stage and how you're going to get there and what's the current status of your transformation. The journey to the cloud is usually represented like that. So we have 4 major steps. The first one is the assessment, which is what you'll cover when doing your cloud strategy. Next, you'll have your preparation, your tests, and your production migration. So most of the assessment part we've covered already. There's another aspect that we'll go through right now, which is the migration path. It can be quite complex, so that's why I wanted to take some time to show you this decision tree. So I won't cover this decision tree in details, but you need to understand that you have a lot of ways that you can actually migrate to the cloud, depending on where you're currently sitting. And you can use that decision tree to define what will be the best course of action for you. So we've published an ebook around cloud migration recently, and this decision tree is available over there. So I encourage you to go to our website and download that ebook to get that that decision tree in a nice format with all the explanations behind it. So that way you'll know how you can migrate to the cloud. So now let's go to the second stage of our execution, which is the preparation. Once you've defined your strategy, you need to get prepared to execute it. So you need to get that cloud environment running, and Atlassian offers a lot of discounts or free cloud instances or free renewals for your server or data center license in order to ease that transition and make sure that you pay only for one environment at a time during the migration period, which can actually last several months. Then you need to get access to that environment to all the stakeholders. You need to install all the apps that you want to use on your target environment. You'll have to prepare all the prerequisites in order for that migration to happen and assemble your team. So your team should be composed of course, the main stakeholders, but also you'll want to select some key users within your companies that know your products very well and that will help you during the user acceptance tests in order to make sure that your migration is successful and that you don't lose any major functionality or data. The next stage of your execution is the test part. So that's when you'll actually test your migration and create your migration procedure. So the migration procedure is composed of two main parts. One is migrate all the data that you can migrate. And the second part is doing all those post-migration tasks like updating links, updating any data or fixing any post-migration issues. So this forms your migration procedure. Then what you'll need to do is create those test cases and execute them. So it's not enough to just go on that new cloud product and you just test some features here and there. It's very important to actually write those test cases and make sure you track when you executed them. This will really help you when you'll do your production migration to make sure you don't have any regression and you don't find the same issues that were discovered during the test on your production environment. Next, you'll want to prepare a detailed runbook for your production migration with all the steps, all the detailed steps for your migration with a start date, start time, end date, end time, who's doing that, what's the acceptance criteria. So that very detailed list will really drive your production migration that you'll do later. And it will also help you handle your communication with your end users because you'll know exactly when you will start that migration and when it will end. Finally, we come to the last stage of our journey, which is the migration itself. You can now run through your runbook and do the production migration. And usually everything should go fine. You'll also want to run your test cases again, and yes, again, because that's how you'll make sure that you fixed all your problems that were identified during your tests after you've migrated to production. And finally, you can enjoy a well-deserved rest. Once you've done all of that, welcome to the cloud. So that concludes my presentation for today. Thanks a lot for your attention. So we can now move on to the Q&A session. Over to you, Anthony.